The Underground Railroad, America's Secret Network. Chapter 4: The Network. Maps stitched into quilts. Part 4.1. A candle in the window. What if freedom was a flicker? No words, no maps, no gunfire, just a tiny flame in a window. It's midnight in Maryland, 1853. The sky is quiet, but the trees are tense. Somewhere beyond the woods, 6 people, mud-stained, starving, terrified, are watching a house from the shadows. They've walked for 2 days. They haven't spoken louder than a whisper. One of them is carrying a baby. The others are barefoot, and they're waiting for a signal. Because if the candle in the window stays lit, it means safe house. If it's not there, keep running. This is the Underground Railroad, but not the one from textbooks. Not a straight line from south to north. Not a mythical route. It was a living system, an invisible network of symbols, codes, and extraordinary people who risked everything to light the way. And sometimes, all they had was a candle. According to the PBS Underground Railroad archive, homes involved in the network developed a visual language of survival, coded signals that communicated life or death information without saying a word. A lit candle in the window. Station open, you're safe to knock, a white handkerchief on the line. Change of plan, danger nearby, come after dark, a flower pot on the left side of the porch. The house was safe yesterday, but not tonight. None of this was written down. It couldn't be. Discovery meant prison, or worse. So everything had to be passed orally, or hidden in plain sight. And every signal had to be trusted like a heartbeat. One conductor recalled, "Sometimes, I'd put a lit lantern in the window, and just wait. I didn't know if anyone would come. Didn't know if they were alive. But if I didn't light it, and they came, they might die." That single candle might be the only thing standing between a mother and her child's freedom. Between hope and slavery. As PBS puts it, no candle ever burned longer than a mother waiting for her child to knock. These weren't just signals, they were acts of war. Every candle in every window was a raised fist against the slave system. Every curtain drawn at the right time. Every porch swept twice instead of once. It all meant something. To the outsider, it was just laundry. To a runaway, it was a map. There's a recorded case in 1855. A man named Thomas Garrett, a Quaker abolitionist in Wilmington, Delaware, was known to signal safe passage by placing a copper kettle on his stoop. But one day, the kettle was gone. A runaway saw that and kept walking. That night, Garrett's house was raided. The signal had worked. Silence saved lives. Another woman in Ohio used to sweep her front steps twice every morning, once as a real chore, once as a message. If she swept 3 times, it meant patrols nearby. Do not stop. And yes, the people she warned were total strangers. She did it anyway. These homes, called stations, were part of a fragile web stretching from the deep south to the Canadian border. And at the center of it all was station masters, people who risked fines, jail time, even lynching, just for leaving a light on. No formal training, no oath, just courage, just faith. And just like that, the Underground Railroad moved, slowly, quietly, flame to flame. Now imagine being a runaway, 50 miles from safety. You don't know the names of the people helping you. You can't read street signs. You're traveling at night. You've eaten nothing but moss and river water for days. And then, you see it. A light in a window. That light says, "You matter. You're almost there. Don't stop now." And somehow, it's enough to take the next step. But not all lights led to safety. Slave catchers knew the codes too. Some set false signals, posing as safe houses to trap fugitives. One runaway described entering a house with a candle in the window, only to find 3 bounty hunters waiting inside. He survived by jumping through a second-story window and disappearing into the marsh. So every decision was a gamble. Every light could be salvation or a snare. This wasn't just courage, this was espionage. This was the 19th century version of safe houses. Dead drops, encrypted channels, Except the messages were flower pots. The passwords were hymns. The agents, ordinary citizens, black and white, armed with nothing but conviction. And yes, some of those station masters were caught, fined, beaten, bankrupted, but others kept the lights on for decades. There's a church in Ripley, Ohio, whose minister, John Rankin, kept a lantern burning every night for 40 years. He saved over 2,000 people. When asked why, he said, because light belongs to the living, and they were still alive. And now, maybe you see it, the Underground Railroad didn't need rails. It needed signals. It didn't have conductors in uniforms. It had mothers with candles, fathers who pretended not to see, children who hummed the warning tune at the right moment. And all across the country, windows lit up, one flame at a time. Next up, Part 4.2 Quilts on the Line. Codes in the thread. What if your grandmother's quilt was more than warmth? What if it told you when to run, where to hide, and which turn might save your life? In the next chapter, we decode the messages sewn into everyday cloth and reveal how art became rebellion. Stay with us. Curious to learn how quilts and songs were used as maps to freedom? Hit that subscribe button now and make sure you don't miss out on the fascinating history we uncover in this video. Check the description for more detailed sources and stories. Part 4.2 Quilts on the Line. Codes in the thread. At first glance, it's just a quilt, a patchwork of triangles, diamonds, zigzags, and circles, hung on a line, waving in the breeze like any other blanket drying in the sun. But to someone who knew how to read it, this wasn't a blanket. It was a map, a signal, a message stitched into cloth, designed not to warm a bed, but to ignite a revolution. This is the story of how some of the most powerful code in American history wasn't written in ink, but in thread. It sounds like folklore, according to oral traditions passed down by African American families in Ohio, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Quilts were sometimes used on the Underground Railroad as visual codes. Each pattern carried meaning. A triangle might mean hide here, a square with a cross, church safe, a flying geese pattern, go north, follow the direction of the geese. Some patterns said wait, others said run, and still others said danger, change route. They were hung on fences, draped over porches, laid across windowsills, and to the untrained eye, just laundry, but to a conductor like Harriet Tubman, they were coordinates. Now, let's be clear, historians debate the full scope of quilt coding. Institutions like the Smithsonian and the National Museum of African American History and Culture note that while hard physical proof is limited, hundreds of oral testimonies from formerly enslaved people reference talking quilts, message blankets, and freedom codes in thread. In one account from a woman in Georgia recorded in the WPA slave narratives, "My mama sewed a monkey wrench right into a quilt, hung it up when Missy wasn't looking, told me that mean pack what we need. Baby, it gone be time soon. Let's break that down." The monkey wrench pattern was one of the most common quilt codes. It meant, get your tools ready, prepare to leave. Tools didn't always mean hammers. Sometimes they meant food. Sometimes it meant a second pair of shoes. Sometimes it meant courage. Then there's the log cabin pattern, a series of dark and light squares, like a window glowing in the night. Some believe that a red center meant a safe house nearby. A black center, do not stop here. The bear paw pattern advised people to follow animal tracks northward, especially through mountains and forests where human trails were watched. The drunkard's path, a swerving, non-linear design. Its meaning, don't take the straight road. Patrols are watching. Zigzag, disappear. And then came the flying geese pattern. Triangular shapes, usually pointing in a single direction. This was the compass, the pointer. It said, head north, it's time. Imagine this, a mother and her children pass a farm in North Carolina. On the porch, a quilt flapping in the wind. Red center, bare paw edges, flying geese in the corner. She doesn't stop, She doesn't stare, but in her mind, she reads it like a GPS. Safe house ahead, use the forest trail, then move north. Here's the twist. These weren't passive signals. They were moving maps. They could be taken down if danger came. Changed, rehung, a code that was living and untraceable. Because by the time patrols arrived, the quilt was just that, a quilt. The message gone, the trail erased. Now, were these quilts universal? No, they weren't mass-produced or standardized. They varied by region, by maker, by story. That was the point, to prevent detection. Each conductor had their own language. And like any language, it had dialects. What looked like art to you was strategy to someone else. Some skeptics point to the lack of written documentation. But here's the thing. You don't write down the codes of a revolution. You remember them. You pass them down at night, by firelight, in whispers. That's why Smithsonian scholars now encourage preserving oral quilt stories as vital cultural evidence, not dismissing them for lack of paper trails. Because paper gets burned, but quilts, they pass from hand to hand, from mother to daughter, from generation to generation, and some of them still exist. One is held at a museum in Ohio. It's faded, patched a dozen times, and stitched with a pattern no one's fully decoded. But if you lean in close, you can still make out the edge of a flying goose. It's pointing north. There's something poetic about it, that a people denied literacy, stripped of books, language, and names, would create a language in the one place no one thought to look. Their blankets. Let's bring it back. Imagine you're Harriet Tubman. It's 2 a.m. You've just led a group across a marsh. You're soaked, exhausted. You round a bend and see a porch, just for a moment. A quilt. It's the pattern you've been waiting for. You nod, you move forward. Because sometimes freedom isn't a speech. It's thread, and the hands that sewed those patterns were holding scissors in one hand and revolution in the other. Next up, part 4.3, follow the drinking gourd. What if your only GPS was a song? What if each verse was a map? In the next chapter, we decode the most famous freedom melody in American history, and the old man who was waiting to carry you to freedom. Stay with us. Part 4.3, follow the drinking gourd. Imagine this. It's night, you're alone, you're barefoot, bleeding, and lost somewhere in Alabama. No map, no compass, no voice to ask for directions. But you hum a song your grandmother taught you while shelling peas on a back porch. And somehow, each note points the way. Because this isn't just a song. It's a map, and the drinking gourd. It's the Big Dipper, and its ladle points straight to the North Star. This is the Underground Railroad's most legendary melody, a song sung in cotton fields, in slave cabins, under breath and behind backs. A song that told you, freedom is that way. Let's break it down. Here's the original chorus, as recorded in oral tradition by the Library of Congress and later compiled by folklorists in the 1920s. Follow the drinking gourd, follow the drinking gourd, for the old man is waiting for to carry you to freedom. If you follow the drinking gourd, at first glance, just a folk song, but beneath the melody, instructions. Let's decode. Follow the drinking gourd. Translation, look up. The drinking gourd is the Big Dipper, 7 stars forming a scoop. Its handle curves and points directly to Belarus. The North Star. Runaways couldn't read signs, but they could read the sky. So this first line, it's a compass, a reminder. When in doubt, look up. Freedom is north. The old man is waiting to carry you to freedom. Who is he? Some historians believe this refers to a real figure, Peg-Leg Joe, a mysterious sailor, perhaps white or mixed race, who traveled the South posing as a handyman. He supposedly taught this coded song to slaves on plantations, planting clues along escape routes, marks shaped like a foot and a peg leg, carved into trees, pointing towards safe rivers and crossings. Others say the old man is God. Some say it's a conductor waiting at the Ohio River, ready to ferry you across. All agree He's hope, and he's real. If you can make it. The riverbank makes a mighty good road. Dead trees will show you the way. Translation: stay off the roads. Follow rivers. Watch for dead trees marked with symbols. Carved instructions left by those who came before. This wasn't just advice, it was survival intelligence. Rivers didn't leave footprints. Dogs lost your scent in water. Bounty hunters hated swamp terrain. Left foot, peg foot, traveling on. There it is, the clue to Peg Leg Joe. One real foot, one wooden peg. His tracks were his trademark. And if you saw a footprint followed by a round dent, you were going the right way. A whole navigational system, disguised as a lullaby. Now imagine singing that as you walk. You're scared, you're starving. You don't know if the person walking next to you will survive the night. So you sing, follow the drinking gourd, and it steadies your breath. It's not just melody, it's a compass made of song. Let's pause. Today, we pull out our phones, tap an address, and the satellite guides us down 6-lane highways. But in 1850, Harriet Tubman was GPS, and her voice more powerful than an app. If she were alive today, she'd be saying, turn left at the moss-covered tree. Pause if you smell smoke. Don't run until the whippoorwill sings. Imagine the notification tone. Tubman voice, rerouting, danger ahead. Take the swamp, it would save your life. But here's the twist, the melody worked because it traveled. You could hum it in front of a white overseer and they'd think it was just a tune. But those in the know, they heard freedom. In fact, many plantation owners believed the song was religious, and it was. In a way, it was a hymn to liberty, a gospel of escape, a lullaby for a better world. Smithsonian Folkways notes that variations of the song appeared in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, with small local changes, each one customized to the region's terrain and threats. Like dialects of resistance, different rhythms, same destination. The song wasn't written in books. It was passed by memory, whispered, hummed, cried, and it endured. During the Civil Rights Movement, Follow the Drinking Gourd was revived in protest marches, taught in classrooms, and added to songbooks for freedom choirs. Because its message, still relevant, look up, keep going, you are not alone. Today, when you look at the Big Dipper, you might see stars, but someone once saw a ladder, a rope, a direction, a promise. They followed the drinking gourd, and it led them home. Next up, Part 4.4 Station Masters, Guardians in the Shadows. Who kept the lights on? Who risked everything for strangers? Meet the farmers, preachers, and shopkeepers who turned their homes into battlefields of hope. Stay with us. Part 4.4 Station Masters, Guardians in the Shadows. By day, they were ordinary, a farmer, a preacher, a teacher with dusty boots and the handshake too firm. They mended fences, balanced books, prayed over Sunday suppers, but when night fell, they became something else, station masters, and their homes weren't homes anymore. They were battlefields. The Underground Railroad had no central command, no headquarters, no military infrastructure. What it had was faith, and behind that faith, people. People like Levi Coffin, a Quaker merchant from Indiana who, by his own count, helped more than 3,000 freedom seekers. People like John Rankin, a Presbyterian minister in Ohio who built his house on a hill, so the lantern he lit each night could be seen across the river, miles away, even from slave territory. And they weren't alone. According to estimates by the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, more than 3,000 individuals, black, white, rich, poor, devout, defined, acted as station masters in the railroad. That's 3,000 homes turned into sanctuaries. 3,000 families risking arrest, violence, or worse. What made them do it? Some were Quakers, guided by deep religious convictions against slavery. Some were abolitionist Baptists or Methodists. Some weren't religious at all. But all shared one thing, a line they refused to cross. Let's start with Levi Coffin. Born in 1798, raised in North Carolina, Coffin grew up witnessing the horror of slavery firsthand. At just 15, he helped a group of enslaved people escape using a hay cart. By the time he settled in Newport, Indiana, he and his wife Catherine had turned their home into a fortress of freedom. It had hidden compartments, double walls, sliding panels. They fed, clothed, and sheltered escapees, sometimes up to 17 people at once, while raising 7 children of their own. And the risk? Lynch mobs, fines, imprisonment. He kept going. He once wrote, "I knew the penalty, but I also knew the cost of silence." Now to John Rankin. His home sat atop a ridge in Ripley, Ohio, overlooking the Ohio River, the border between slavery and freedom. He built it there on purpose. He kept a lantern burning in the upstairs window every night for 40 years. It was a lighthouse. Runaways crossing the river could see it shining through the trees. It meant, "Come, we will not turn you in." Rankin's sons once rowed across in the dead of night to rescue a mother and her child being pursued by dogs. The mother, Eliza Harris, whose dramatic escape was later fictionalized in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Rankin never asked for credit. He asked only that the light stay on. But station masters weren't all white. Many were black families, freedmen or freeborn, who risked even more. If a white man was caught aiding a fugitive, he was fined. If a black man was caught, he might be enslaved or killed. Take the story of William Still, a free black man in Philadelphia, who worked as a clerk by day and by night, documented every runaway he assisted. He kept detailed notes, names, ages, routes, family connections. He hid them in the false bottom of a trunk. Why? Because he believed that one day, those families might be reunited. One entry reads, "I wrote every name in the hope they might be called again." That trunk became the source of the Underground Railroad records, a book that historians today call the most valuable first-hand account of the railroad in existence. Let's be honest, not all station masters were saints. Some were messy, some fought with their neighbors, some got drunk and talked too loud. But when it counted, they opened the door, and that act, simple, silent, was treason. Under the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, assisting an escapee carried a penalty of $1 fine and 6 months in prison per person helped. Levi Coffin's tab, had he been caught, over $3 million in today's dollars. He joked about it in his later years, saying, "Had they fined me, they might have gotten the house, but not my soul." And here's the twist. Most of the 3.00 plus station masters, we don't know their names. They didn't keep diaries. They didn't write memoirs. They simply did what had to be done, and then swept the floor, made breakfast, and went back to being invisible. Because they knew history wasn't waiting to remember them, but they lit the lantern anyway. There's something haunting about that. The idea that the Underground Railroad wasn't built by legends, but by neighbors. By people who whispered, who built trapdoors in barns, who let strangers sleep in their daughter's bed and didn't ask for thanks. They were guardians in the shadows, not heroes in the traditional sense, but the reason heroes like Harriet Tubman survived. Next up, Part 4.5, The Trapdoors Beneath the Pews. What if your church wasn't just a house of worship, but a war zone? In the next chapter, we step inside a frozen church basement in Ohio, where 40 people waited out a blizzard beneath the feet of unsuspecting congregants. Stay with us. Are you amazed by the clever tactics used by the conductors? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. How do you think these hidden messages shaped the escape routes? Don't forget to check the description for more information and links to other resources. Part 4.5. The Trapdoors Beneath the Pews. It looked like any other church. White clapboard siding, a steeple that creaked in the wind, wooden pews polished by generations of Sunday pants, a pulpit worn smooth from years of sermons. But beneath those pews, a secret waited in the cold. A trapdoor, a stone basement, 40 people, and one silent war against slavery. waged not with weapons, but with whispers and floorboards. This wasn't just a house of worship, it was a battlefield, and every hymn sung above muffled the breath of those hiding below. According to documents preserved in the PBS Underground Railroad archive, one of the most remarkable safe houses in the network wasn't a farmhouse, or a barn, or a backwoods shack. It was a church, Trinity Church, located in a small Ohio town just miles from the Kentucky border, a line that separated slavery from freedom. On paper, it was Presbyterian. In practice, revolutionary. Winter, 1854. The Ohio River had frozen, but the patrols hadn't. A group of 40 freedom seekers, mostly families from Mississippi and western Tennessee, had just crossed into Ohio on foot, shivering, half-starved, and frostbitten. They were supposed to rest one night in a Quaker home. But word came. A bounty team was close. Too close, so the conductor made a decision. Not the house, the church. By candlelight, members of the Trinity congregation opened a narrow wooden panel beneath the altar. Below it, a set of stairs so steep it felt like descending into a grave. At the bottom, a stone cold room, originally built as an ice cellar to preserve food, but that night, it would preserve lives. The hiding space was no larger than a single-car garage. Dirt floor, low ceiling, one lantern, 40 people huddled together. The youngest, a 2-month-old infant wrapped in rags. The oldest, a man named Elijah who had escaped bondage at 73. There were no beds, no food, just silence. Upstairs, Sunday service continued. Hymns filled the hall. People sat in pews just inches above the heads of those in hiding. No one knew, except the preacher, except the organist, except the ushers who passed the collection plate while glancing nervously at the trapdoor. That night, temperatures dropped below zero. The baby cried once, and a woman pressed her hand gently over the child's mouth, not to smother it, but to soothe it without sound. She sang, not aloud, but into her daughter's cheek, a hum so soft it wouldn't reach the rafters. It sounded like a lullaby, but it was a prayer. One man, a freedman named Isaac who had joined him as a guide, later recalled, "You didn't breathe unless someone told you to. We sat so still, I forgot where my legs ended and someone else's began. I thought I died, but then I heard the choir sing above us, and I knew I was still alive." That night, Trinity Church became a holy place in more ways than one. It became a station of salvation, and its blueprint, genius. The trapdoor was hidden beneath the pulpit, shielded by carpet and the custom-built step. The entrance led to a narrow tunnel that curved under the sanctuary, designed to funnel voices up and away from the basement. The stone walls were insulated with hay and horsehair. It wasn't just a cellar. It was architecture as resistance. This wasn't the only church like it. Across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, dozens of congregations, especially among Quakers and Progressive Methodists, modified their buildings to include false walls, double floors, and emergency exits. In Erie County, a church built in 1845 had pews that could be lifted to reveal a crawl space. In Cincinnati, a chapel kept an underground passageway leading from its basement to a hidden barn, 300 feet away, so runaways could disappear even if the church was raided. These weren't coincidences, they were plans, drawn in secret, funded by offerings, built by faith. And yes, some churches were caught, some were burned, some ministers were arrested mid-sermon, but others stayed silent, stayed open, stayed brave. And through them, hundreds, possibly thousands, of people passed through the trapdoor of history and into life. And yet, most of the names, gone. The woman who kept the baby quiet, never recorded. The man who carved the tunnel, forgotten. The elder who stood guard at the church door with a Bible in one hand and a rifle hidden behind his coat. Unnamed, but they were real, and they were heroes. That's what made the Underground Railroad extraordinary. Not the maps, not the songs, not the tracks, But the people who used everyday things, like a pew, a lantern, a basement, and turned them into weapons against an empire. The church at Trinity still stands today. The trapdoor is still there. Sometimes, during tours, guides open it slowly and shine a flashlight into the cold dark beneath. They say it smells of stone and silence, and something else, memory. Next up, Part 4.6 Songs, Psalms, and Safe Houses. The church was more than a hiding place. It was a signal tower, a songbook, a safe house dressed in scripture. In the next chapter, we explore the role of religion, not as submission, but as subversion. Stay with us. Part 4.6 Songs, Psalms, and Safe Houses. It started with a sermon. The preacher stepped up to the pulpit, Bible in hand, voice calm. He read from Paul's letter to the Ephesians. "Servants, obey your masters." The congregation nodded. Some said, "Amen." But outside, in the kitchen behind the church, beneath a floorboard where no one could see, 3 people were hiding. That same preacher, he'd put them there. Welcome to one of the greatest paradoxes of the Underground Railroad, the weaponization of faith. In many parts of the American South, religion was used as a tool of obedience. Slaveholders insisted on Sunday worship. They hired preachers, often enslaved themselves, who preached scriptures about loyalty, patience, and divine submission. Passages like, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear," or, "The Lord disciplines those he loves." These verses were repeated, twisted, used to justify bondage. But the enslaved, they were listening, not just to the words, but to the spaces between them. And sometimes, to the man speaking them, because some of those preachers were spies. In a remarkable account preserved in the Library of Congress Slave Narratives, a man named Reverend Jacob Trent in Mississippi began his life as an enslaved field worker. Later, his owner promoted him to spiritual leadership, hoping to pacify the others. But Trent had other plans. He preached loyalty, but at night, he changed the hymns. He taught his people new verses. Verses like, "Wade in the water, children, God's gonna trouble the water," which, on the surface, sounded like baptism. But really, it was instruction. Wade in water to cover your scent. Patrol dogs lose your trail in streams. Another spiritual, steal away to Jesus. Again, sounds like worship, but it meant, steal away tonight. The route is open, be ready. These spirituals, later called freedom songs, became the code language of the oppressed. They were hymns with dual meanings, melodies with maps. A chorus meant hope, a verse meant movement, a change in tempo meant change in plans. Even the mighty, amazing grace took on new meaning. The line, "I once was lost, but now am found," to some, that was salvation. To others, that was literal. I escaped, I made it, I'm free. And yes, sometimes the humor crept in. One formerly enslaved man recalled, "I sang that in the field so loud, my master thought I'd done found Jesus. Truth is, I was just happy the route was clear." Churches became safe houses dressed in scripture. The preacher was the gatekeeper. The choir was the signal team. The basement was the ark. And the word was sharper than any sword. Now to the twist. One preacher in Georgia, Reverend Amos Gray, was a man torn in two. He began as a government informant, paid to listen for escape plans, report names. He turned in 12 people. 9 were caught, but the guilt haunted him. When his own brother disappeared, Reverend Gray realized he had betrayed his own blood. So he changed. He went quiet. He stopped reporting. Then, he opened his home. Over 5 years, he helped more than 200 people escape by hosting them in his parsonage attic. His signal, a cross painted with red berries on the chapel door. The berries, poisonous in the wild, a symbol. This place is dangerous, unless you know the way. And still, he preached. He read the same verses. He told the same stories. But behind the scenes, he was rewriting scripture in real time. It wasn't just men. One church in Pennsylvania was led by a female deacon, Sarah Whitby, who composed original hymns with 5-syllable reversals, a musical trick that let her invert meaning midline. She trained children to memorize these safe psalms as part of choir practice. Some of those children later used those same rhythms to time their crossings north. Religion had long been twisted to defend slavery, but in the hands of the enslaved, it was twisted back. It became a tool, a subversion, a veil, a disguise, a torch passed in song. One Union chaplain who joined the railroad later wrote, "It was not God they feared, it was those who claimed to speak for him. But when they sang, I believe they heard God directly." And here's the real power. The people who sat quietly in pews, who folded hands and bowed heads, who hummed hymns and said grace, they were not docile, they were dangerous, in the best way. When the preacher said, "Go in peace," some went home, others went to the trapdoor, to the back alley, to the river, to freedom. Next up, Part 4.7 False Flaws. Real courage, from hymns to hoaxes, from disguises to deadly risks. In our next chapter, we meet the master illusionists of the underground, women and men who faked funerals, forged papers, and fooled slave catchers with courage and cunning. Stay with us. Part 4.7 False Flaws. Real courage. What if the only way to live was to fake your death? What if your best shot at freedom was to pretend to be your enemy? What if the person who saved you wasn't a soldier or a preacher, but a 12-year-old girl who knew which floorboard squeaked? This is the story of the Underground Railroad's most daring escapes, a network built not just on bravery, but on brilliance, hidden compartments, disguises, misdirection, risk, and sometimes comedy, because when you're outnumbered and outgunned, sometimes deception is your greatest weapon. And courage, it wears many disguises. Let's start with Ellen and William Craft. A love story, a con game, and one of the boldest jailbreaks in American history. Ellen was light-skinned, so light, in fact, that she could sometimes pass for white. William, her husband, was not. So, in 1848, they came up with a plan so outrageous it sounded like a parody. Ellen would disguise herself as a wealthy, disabled white man. William would pretend to be her enslaved servant. That way, they could travel openly, by train, through the heart of the South, without suspicion. No hiding, no forests, just pure theater. They bought second-hand clothes. Ellen bandaged her right arm to avoid having to write. She wore tinted glasses. She wrapped her head in cloth, claiming illness. William played the quiet, obedient valet. They boarded a train from Macon, Georgia, then a steamer to Charleston, then another to Philadelphia. The entire journey took 4 days, over 1.00 miles. They dined with plantation owners. Ellen shook hands with slave traders. She even declined an offer of brandy, saying, "My doctor forbids it." She couldn't read, but she read the room better than anyone. On December 25, 1848, Christmas Day, they arrived in Philadelphia. Free, later, they fled again, this time to England, to escape bounty hunters sent to bring them back. Their story was so shocking, it made headlines in both America and Europe. But here's the twist, it was just one of thousands. In another case, a man named Henry Box Brown literally mailed himself to freedom. Yes, you read that right. In 1849, he climbed into a wooden shipping crate, 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, 2.5 feet tall, and was nailed shut by an accomplice. He carried a few biscuits, a bladder of water, a single tool in case of emergency. Then he was shipped via express mail from Richmond, Virginia to Philadelphia, 26 hours, no food, no light, no air holes. At one point, the box was turned upside down. He nearly passed out, but when abolitionists opened the box the next day, Henry emerged and said, "How do you do, gentlemen," like Houdini with a cause. Others escaped in hearses, disguised as corpses. Some hid in coffins, kept still while mourners wept above them. One woman faked being blind and mute for 2 states, so she wouldn't have to speak and betray her accent. Another case involved a man disguised as a chimney sweep, covered in soot. Crouched in a barrel, he popped out when it rained. The officer checking cargo said he thought the barrel smelled too alive. There were false walls in carriages, removable floorboards in wagons, hay bales with hollow centers. One woman was hidden in a stack of books in the back of a traveling preacher's cart. When guards poked the stack, she coughed. The preacher said, "Pardon me, that's the Holy Spirit." They let him pass. But the wildest part, the Underground Railroad's greatest heroes weren't always adults. Many of the people who hid, warned, and even distracted slave catchers were women and children. A 10-year-old girl named Josie Patterson once tripped and spilled a bucket of water deliberately, just to slow down a patrol long enough for her neighbor to escape through the back alley. A teenage boy staged a fake dog attack, complete with barks and growls, to draw attention away from a wagon carrying fugitives. One mother used muffins to hide forged documents, smuggling them across checkpoints inside a bakery basket. Resistance came in all forms, and it didn't always wear boots. Sometimes it wore braids, or bonnets, or bare feet. One station master once said, "I trusted the children most. They knew how to keep secrets, and they could lie with their eyes open." But let's not sugarcoat it. These tactics were dangerous. Ellen and William Craft could have been recognized. Box Brown could have suffocated. Every fake flaw could have meant prison. Every disguise, a dice roll with death. And yet they did it. Why? Because, as Ellen Craft later said, it was better to gamble everything for liberty than to live in guaranteed bondage. These were not just escape stories. They were acts of strategic rebellion, of theater, of code, of cunning. These people didn't just run. They outfought an empire. They built a system of illusions so sophisticated, so seamless, that even today, historians are still uncovering the blueprints. One recently discovered safe house in Pennsylvania had a rotating fireplace, yes, like in a movie, leading to a tunnel carved into bedrock. Another, in upstate New York, used a fake confessional booth inside a Catholic church. You'd walk in guilty and walk out free. And yet, most of the schemers weren't engineers, or tacticians, or military men. They were tailors, seamstresses, cooks, gardeners, grandmothers, people who made do with what they had, and turned survival into an art form. Next up, Part 4.8 Ghosts Who Kept the Lights On. They had no statues, no medals, no names in textbooks, but without them, there would have been no railroad. In the next chapter, we honor the nameless, faceless builders of freedom, the ghosts who lit the way. Stay with us. Part 4.8 Ghosts Who Kept the Lights On. There's a reason you haven't heard their names. They didn't ask to be remembered. They didn't leave behind memoirs. They didn't pose for portraits or demand medals. They just opened the doors. And when freedom came knocking, mud-soaked, breathless, hunted, they answered. They were the ghosts who kept the lights on. And they were the backbone of the Underground Railroad. By 1860, historians estimate that over 3.00 individuals, black and white, male and female, rich and poor, had risked their lives to help others escape bondage. Some helped once, some helped hundreds, some hid fugitives in their barns, others passed along coded songs, some fed strangers at midnight and never asked their names, then went back to bed. And yet, you won't find them in your textbooks. No bronze statue, no street name, no plaque in front of the homes they turned into sanctuaries. Why? Because they weren't in it for the legacy. They were in it for the life in front of them. In Gateway to Freedom, Eric Foner writes, most station masters never asked to be remembered. They knew anonymity wasn't just a safety measure. It was part of the mission. Be invisible so others can be seen. Be silent, so others can speak. Disappear, so others can arrive. And yet, we remember Harriet Tubman, as we should. She was the conductor, the face of the railroad. But even she admitted, she didn't do it alone. She once said, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. But that train only moved because of the station masters who kept the fires burning, because someone left the lantern in the window, because someone taught her the terrain, because someone built the trail and never took credit." The truth is, Harriet Tubman didn't survive because she was lucky. She survived because, night after night, a ghost lit the way. A mother with a bowl of stew, a child with a signal lantern, a man with a key and a knot. One woman in Kentucky left her back gate unlatched every night for 12 years. She never knew who would pass through. Sometimes no one came. Sometimes it was a mother and 2 children. Sometimes it was a man too weak to stand. She never asked their names. She just made sure the gate didn't creak and left cornbread on the fence post. A blacksmith in Pennsylvania built false walls into wagons, charging nothing. A widow in Vermont taught her grandsons to whistle a song only runaways would understand. A 14-year-old boy in Illinois left chalk marks on fence posts, directing people away from patrols. None of them appear in history books. But without them, there is no Harriet Tubman. There are no 300 people who made it out. There is no railroad. And here's the twist, we call them ghosts, but they were real, flesh and bone, afraid, brave, messy, determined. They were the quiet engine of history, the human infrastructure of liberation. And now, maybe you're wondering something. If you'd been alive back then, would you have opened your door? Would you have risked your job, your family, your comfort, for someone you didn't know, for someone you'd never see again? If the answer is yes, then maybe you understand what this story was always about. Not just about Harriet, or Henry Box Brown, or Ellen Craft, but about the hundreds, the thousands, who gave freedom a home, even when they had none themselves. So next time you walk past an old barn, or kneel in a pew, or see a light left on in the window of a stranger, remember them. They didn't want to be remembered, but maybe they should be. Next up, Chapter 5: Unsung Station Masters. They weren't generals, they weren't saints, but in the eyes of those they saved, they were everything. In our next chapter, we bring you 4 untold stories of ordinary people who became extraordinary by doing one thing: opening the door. Stay with us. If you believe that history deserves to be told in all its hidden details, make sure to subscribe, share this story, and let us know what part of the Underground Railroad network struck you the most. Plus, explore the description for exclusive content on the people who made freedom possible.